At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu. With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
This is Brannon House Live. Whether the issue is law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, religion, government, or national security, Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon House.
And good evening and welcome on this June 11th, 2025. Oh boy, you better text, tweet, email, Twitter, Truth Social. We're going to go right into it, folks. I'm not going to stop and promote products or nothing. We're going to get right into it. We have a lot of breaking news tonight. But you folks, please stop and tweet, text, email, Facebook, Twitter, Truth Social. Tell all your family and friends to tune in right now. Because most of the people in America and around the world have no contextual understanding for what is happening in California and what is about to spread to other parts of America, apparently on Saturday, June 14th. They don't understand, many of them. I think President Trump's walking right into a trap. He might even be walking into a trap when it comes to Iran. Not to mention the trap being set for him, I think, here in America, related to the military, the Marines, the National Guard, whatnot, in California. But what is all this about in California, folks? Have you seen the president of the Senate in Mexico holding up a map? Hey, saying this was our land. You guys took it. So we'll build the wall. I told President Trump in his first term, we'll build the wall. We'll build it to there, taking Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, Utah, all these states, right? Is this about a gigantic Hegelian dialectic process? Big word. I talked about it on radio today. I've talked about it for decades. Thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, and you get sides to fight, and then you offer up a solution. You remember the Fabian window? I've talked about that for so many years, created by George Bernard Shaw in 1910. I'm going to talk about that tonight. I want to roll for you about 20 minutes of my monologue from radio today. There's no reason for me to do it again. But it's so important that it needs to be heard tonight. So instead of me doing it, I'm going to just roll my own monologue from radio today. And I'm going to explain to you what virtually very few people understand. They watch the news, but they have no idea what they're looking at and how this is highly orchestrated. Or maybe they do realize it's highly orchestrated, but do they realize why it's been orchestrated? What's the end game? What's the goal? Let me explain it to you. So if you want your family and friends to understand what's happening so they're not deceived, again, you might want to text, tweet, email, Facebook, Twitter, Truth Social, whatever it is you do, and tell them to tune in to Worldview Tube right now. Because I'm going to go to this 20-minute monologue. And then I'm going to go to Patrick Wood. I'm going to play some videos. And I'm going to explain how this all fits in with Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the United Nations, technocracy, using technology to control people, social credit scores, 15-minute cities, which some now are calling freedom cities. How it fits in with digital currency, how it fits in with minerals, land, all being used as hard assets to back currencies, tokenizing the hard assets of the world on a ledger. How it all fits together. A North American Union. Canada is a 51st state. Mexico's saying what they are. What's going on here, folks? Do you understand? I want you to understand. I really do. Now, before I go to all that, while you're tweeting and texting and emailing and Getter and Truth Social to all your family and friends, I want to go to a clip of President Trump real quick on Iran. Because we're getting word tonight, a lot of, I guess, the embassy in Baghdad's being told to clean out. We're getting these reports. I can't validate them, but we're following them. But we are hearing that President Trump, and I'm going to show you, gave an interview about Iran. I mean, there's so many things going on from in America, outside America, related to our military, Iran. Voices telling President Trump, you need to strike Iran with Israel. Voices saying, no, we don't want to go to war. Do you realize the terror cells they likely have here? Biological chemicals? That's what we've been saying here for a long time. But here's what President Trump just said about a meeting, I guess at Camp David with the generals. Isn't that interesting? I don't think President Trump's a big fan of Camp David. But he flew over there apparently and had a meeting with a bunch of generals. Now that's interesting. Why did they have to do that? Are they concerned about major leaks? So they wanted to have a more controlled meeting at Camp David? Listen to what he had to say because it tells us a lot where we may be going. Here we go.
So Camp David, you were just there and you with the generals and the admirals and Marco Rubio. What were you talking about?
Well, I can't tell you exactly, but it was in pleasure. Without discussing anything, look, we had a meeting, a very important meeting, and really talked about many subjects.
Iran, Ukraine,
one of
Russia.
them were, all of that. It's all big topics, especially when you have generals and admirals.
Do you think you're going to be able to stop Iran from enriching its nuclear?
I don't know. I did think so, and I'm getting more and more less confident about it. They seem to be delaying, and I think that's a shame. But I'm less confident now than I would have been a couple of months ago. Something happened to them, but I am much less confident of a deal being made. I would have said a deal would be made.
Something happened to them?
No, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
like China talked them out of it?
I have instincts about things.
You think China talked them out of it?
No, I don't think China has anything to do with it. I just think maybe they don't want to make a deal. What can I say? And maybe they do.
So what does that mean?
There's nothing final.
What happens then?
Well, if they don't make a deal, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
If they do make a deal, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon too. But they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. So it's not going to matter from that standpoint. But it would be nicer to do it without warfare, without people dying.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer to do it. But I don't think I see the same level of enthusiasm for them to make a deal. I think I think they would make a mistake, but we'll see. I guess time will tell.
Wow. So there you go. He's not very hopeful about Iran, which is not good. The question is, will America go with Israel to strike Iran? And what will that mean for us? Well, we've warned what that will mean for us. Are we going to let Israel go it alone? I don't know. Again, there are competing voices in the White House on this one. Pray for President Trump. Pray that he has wisdom and discernment, folks, because it impacts every one of us. But sadly, most Americans, again, are checked out on these issues, thinking that, that's over there. Oh, trust me. Hezbollah, Iran's team, they're not just over there. They are here. I can promise you that. Well, let's move on to our main topic tonight, and that is the crisis, the conflict, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, the conflict that is moving America toward what may be a North American Union, moving America maybe toward the idea of a regional currency. What is this really all about? Again, here is about a 20-minute monologue from my radio show today at 1 o'clock Central. I want to play it, and you might want to get a pen and paper and take notes. And then after that, we're going to go to Patrick Wood, and then we're going to go to Alex Newman. Folks, this is something you're probably not going to get in a lot of other places, but it helps you put the puzzle pieces together. Because trust me, the globalists have been telegraphing and telling us what it is they want to do. Question is, have we been listening? Here, yes, we have been. You have been. But here we are tonight on June 11th, 2025, with more of an understanding as the crisis and chaos is unfolding in America, but it is planned chaos. Question is, what's the manufactured crisis supposed to bring about? Here's my monologue, then we'll go to Patrick Wood and Alex Newman. Hegelian dialectic process. Oh no, don't let the eyes roll back in your head here. Hegelian dialectic process, conflict, that's all it means. Thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, conflicting with each other in order to bring about a third way or a third option. In other words, to get the people to go where they otherwise would never go. What is World War III really all about? Is it about regime change? Probably. Getting rid of Putin, who doesn't want to go along with all the New World Order, LGBTQ, green agenda? Probably. Is it also about nation building? A region? Minerals? President Trump came out today with a tweet that he's firmed up a deal with China. Apparently has to do with minerals from China up front. So much seems to be about getting hard assets. What was it, about 2010 when I did the radio show telling you guys I thought we were headed toward hard assets, land, and what's under the land to be the basis for a global currency, or at least something to back up our own currency, which is why the federal government was taking up so much federal state land and federalizing it. 2010, I think it was what we looked up a few weeks ago, that radio show in our vault. It doesn't take a lot to know that. You just got to be thinking, well, this fiat currency eventually is going to implode, so you got to go to something, but no one's going to trust it if it doesn't have a hard backing, right? Hard assets. And now President Trump's cutting a deal with China. They're going to provide minerals up front. Is Russia in World War III, is that about them wanting to get a hold of minerals in China or in Russia, but also getting rid of Putin for regime change, for a part of maybe a different region as we go toward 10 world regions as promoted by the European Commission, the Club of Rome, the UN? Isn't that what Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 has been about? Grabbing up all the world's resources in the name of environmentalism. So the people who want to create a new system to replace the failing Federal Reserve System have a way to continue to enslave people on a global scale and benefit from their work, their labor. Isn't at the core of everything really that work, labor? And so you make everybody a part of the system and you become their slave. And whatever work you do, they tokenize your assets, your property, your values. By the way, isn't that what Klaus Schwab said? By 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy? What if the conflict with Mexico right now, and that's really who's helping fund this. Federalists had a great piece out yesterday on how Mexico has a lot to answer for helping to push this these riots in California. They're waving the Mexican flags like crazy there. Yesterday, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, in the Oval Office, standing next to the Resolute desk at which President Trump was sitting, greatly chided the president of Mexico for encouraging these riots. Now, why would the president of Mexico do that? Who would be encouraging the president of Mexico to do that? Who is really pushing this agenda, folks? We have several members of Congress, both the in the House and the Senate, calling for investigations into this guy by the last name of Singham, who they say may be funding this, who has reported ties back to the CCP, some guy that's close to being a billionaire. Great testimony today on this, by the way, by Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'll play that on Brandon House Live tonight. Who are some of the other folks maybe in the shadows that are funding these groups and pushing for this conflict? Because again, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, let people clash, and then you come up with a third option or the solution to the problem. The problem that's been manufactured, the manufactured crisis. Remember in 2020, early 2020, I did the presentation on, what was it, ID 2020 or ID 2030? I can't remember what it was called, but it was a conference at the United Nations about how everyone needs to get chipped, basically. That's part of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. Remember, it's goal 16.9 in the global goals. the Sustainable Development Goals, that we'll all be tagged like cattle. And the idea was we could do this for banking. You had the Bank for International Settlements behind it, which is the central bank of central bankers. You had the United Nations behind it. You had all kinds of globalist groups and organizations, big ones, behind this idea of getting everybody tagged. And it was said, remember in 2020 when we covered that with you guys one night on TV during the COVID pandemic lockdowns, that this would be used to deal with cross-border travel. So how do you get everybody to agree to be tagged? Well, you have a failing currency. Box checked, failing U.S. currency due to debt, fiat currency backed by nothing. Wait a minute, what happened to going into the Fort Knox to see if the gold is there? Oh, that didn't happen, did it? Congressman Massey from Kentucky is offering up legislation to go into Fort Knox. We'll see where that goes.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Auditing the Fed, that's never happened. I don't think it ever will. But they have to replace the failing system with something else. The failing dollar. New. By the way, there's also legislation pending. New legislation pending on how we're going to take all these cryptocurrencies and stable coins and bring them under federal control and standards. They're moving for something. They may not call it a central bank digital currency. Maybe they'll call it something else. Maybe the central bank, as we know, it won't even exist anymore. But I kind of think it will. Maybe they'll just decide, you know what, we thought we could go without the central bank digital currency, but we have no choice. We have to go to it anyway. At least they took that controversy off the table for a while because we were told that wasn't going to happen. But maybe that's just a ruse. But back to why we're seeing this in California with Mexico pushing it. I think it's part of the Hegelian dialectic. Have you guys seen the president of the Senate in Mexico? Now, I'm pretty sure this was in Spanish, and I got a D in high school Spanish, so I can't help you here. Let's see what he says here. Let's see if this is English or Spanish, guys. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, he says, when President-elect Donald Trump said I got to go slower, who was 16 days away from taking office, this is the president of the Senate in Mexico, by the way, for the first time as president, about to assume the role. And I said, yes, we'll build the wall. Yes, we'll pay for it, but we'll do it according to the map of Mexico from 1830. Now, folks, those of you listening on radio today, he's holding up a map and saying, we're going to build the wall from the map of 1830, which means that Mexico takes over pretty much all of Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and California. And I think you got Utah in there. Wait a minute, that sounds like La Raza, the race, the group La Raza, the race. So he says, we'll do it based on that map. He said, this is what the United States was in 1830, and this was part of Mexico. It wasn't all Mexico. If you can see, maybe a third, at least a quarter of the North American territory was part of Mexico until 1846. We were stripped of these territories. We were settled there before. The nation, now known as the United States. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, I guess that's it, Guadalupe Hidalgo, establishes rights for the people settled in those territories which were not respected. The city of Nuevo Laredo. Laredo was a Mexican city. Laredo. Isn't there a John Wayne movie? I love that John Wayne movie. And the city of Nuevo Laredo was formed by the Mexicans who lived in Laredo and didn't want to stay on the United States side and come over to what is now national territory. With this geography, how can they talk about liberating Los Angeles and California? The United States government? Liberate them from whom? The Mexican men and women who are settled in that place are settled in what has always been their homeland. Names don't lie. The most spoken language in Los Angeles is Spanish. Don't need to speak English to be in Los Angeles. And here we are in the current situation. This is part of the United States, yes. The United States government has the right to implement whatever immigration measures it deems appropriate, certainly. But they have no right to violate the dignity of migrants. They have no right to separate families. They have no right to subject them to suffering, persecution, or harassment. They have no right to break the law that the United States government and the people of the United States set themselves. Now, with that, what does this sound like to you? What does this sound like to you, folks? Think Hegelian dialectic process. Didn't we hear a few months ago President Trump talking about, and has said it over and over, making Canada our 51st state? And there was even a map shown or talked about Canada, Mexico, Greenland, maybe even Panama. But certainly Mexico, America, and Canada. Maybe this is where we should go. Well, that would make sense from a standpoint of natural resources to now back your North American currency, which the president of Mexico at the time, Vicente Fox, told Larry King was in the works. Down the road, he said to Larry King when he was meeting with George W. Bush. It's down the road, but that's later. The Amero, a North American currency. What are you going to back it with? Hard assets, land, minerals, oil, natural gas, hydroelectricity, labor, people. And then what are you going to? And then how are you going to deal with these people saying, "This was our land, we want it back"? And if we don't get it back, we're going to be rioting. No justice, no peace, kind of thing. So what do? You have a conflict. So the idea has already been put out there, North American Union, for years, something we've been talking about. My friend, the late Phyllis Schlafly, and I talked about, whatever, right? President Trump brings up this idea. We're going, what is that about? Sounds like the technocracy of the 1930s that Patrick Wood was educating us about. And now we have all of a sudden, voila, conflict in California with Mexican flags waving like crazy. And billionaires supposedly funding it, and NGOs, many of those, of course, tied back to the United Nations, who wants what? World government, and has already done what? Divide the world into 10 regions. So maybe this conflict is about creating a crisis, and then we negotiate a solution to the manufactured crisis, which is, all right, tell you what. Why don't we merge together as three nations? Why don't we get everybody biochipped, 16.9 of the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and everybody can come back and forth, cross-border crossing. We can keep our North American highway and interstate they all have been talking about, and problem solved, life goes on. And you can keep your housekeeper, by the way. She ain't going anywhere. I don't know. We'll talk about this more on the other side. Don't go away. Glad you're with us, Worldview Radio, website worldviewradio.com. Now, I've been telling you guys for so many years, if you want to understand the globalists and what they're doing, you have to understand the Hegelian dialectic process. And I've shown you the Fabian window. George Bernard Shaw developed the Fabian window, I think about 1910 off the top of my head. Been a while since I've talked about this. And of course, you have the man in the red coat and the guy in the green coat, and they're banging with anvils or with hammers on a hot globe that's on an anvil. And the guy in the green coat is holding this hot globe that's just come out of the fire with a pair of tongs on the on the anvil while they bang it with hammers. And at the top, it says, remold it nearer to the heart's desire. To the far left, you have a guy in a purple coat with a bellow, blowing air, oxygen onto the fire to make it bigger. Take a crisis and you make it bigger. You blow life, air, wind, oxygen. You give it oxygen. Give it more oxygen to make the fire bigger. And at the bottom of the window are the Fabians on their knees, praying to a stack of Fabian books. George Bernard Shaw on the far left, standing, clapping, kind of mocking them because he wanted this all to be known. Everybody should know about this. This is a great idea. They're like, be quiet. And right above the hot earth that's on fire is the wolf in sheep's clothing. Look at that, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Be very careful, folks, of the wolf in sheep's clothing. Be very careful of the religion that is being used. Wolves in sheep's clothing. This is the globalist. They tell you what they're going to do, but the question is, do people listen? Do they pay attention? The Hegelian dialectic, the change comes from the conflict. Saul Alinsky knew that. All of the conflicts that are going on now, folks, they're all, most of them, created, manipulated, and developed on purpose. And if our own economic system, which was built really now after we stripped the gold window and closed that, Nixon, got the Federal Reserve in 1913 with a currency now backed by nothing really but consumer confidence. That all eventually had to unravel, but they knew that. They knew that. And so they were planning for a new system. And isn't that what the technocrats, and this is really all about, and Palantir and Peter Thiel talking about the option is either Antichrist or Armageddon, unless we have another system. That's what it's all about, folks. And you're just tagged cattle in the system. They knew they eventually had to go to this. Now they're manufacturing crises or what are naturally occurring from their bad decisions. Ideas have consequences. They're now going to escalate the crises until the people tire and go where they would never otherwise go without the crisis. Mexico says, we want all that land. That was ours. No justice, no peace. American corporations say we need that cheap labor. Americans say, well, we've had these people in our church, in our communities. Can't just rip them out of here. They go to our schools. We know their kids. Some of them have even been paying taxes. So you get all the emotion going, and then you say, okay, here's a solution. Let's merge the three nations together. Let's go to one currency, back it with all of our minerals and assets, have a great reset. Is that what's going on here? Oh, by the way, everybody's got to get biochips so we know who's coming and going, and people aren't milking the system and hitting it 2 or 3 times with benefits, which, by the way, Doge has told us that's going on. Well, that's very convenient for Doge to tell us all that. Now we realize how bad the corruption is. The people are angry. We want that to end. Well, we can get all that to end. Everybody's just got to get biochips.